I'm John Hall, Chief Sales Officer for Crux Xcelerate. We specialize in sales coaching and just people development. I'm on with Prosper from the Prosper Online podcast. Thrilled to be on this podcast. We're going to talk about things that help us be the very best version of ourselves, both professionally and personally.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show, your premier destination for exclusive insights into the journeys of extraordinary individuals. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today we're going to be diving deep into the captivating story of John Hall, literally from rodeos to revenue. Now, John, how are you doing today?
I'm well, Prosper. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, the pleasure is all mine. I can't wait to dive into your story and everything else that comes along with it. You started off your journey riding bulls in Texas, right?
Well, I didn't necessarily ride bulls. I rode in rodeos as a kid. And when you're a little kid, you ride the little small steers. So I can't really claim a bull, but they were much larger than I was. And that's kind of how I started as a kid.
Absolutely. So there we go. For those that are watching right now, the bull wrangler himself in the rodeos of Texas there. And now he is orchestrating deals in the boardrooms of Madison Square Garden. And John Hall's journey is nothing short of remarkable. I mean, from his early days in the fashion industry to executive roles with the NFL, NBA, and NHL. And he was also telling me earlier on his stint in Scotland when he was doing international representation of the NFL. And now he is the Chief Sales Officer at Crux Xcelerate. And John's path is a testimony to resilience, adaptability, and the power of betting on oneself. Now, for those that are watching right now, I want you to stay tuned to uncover the lessons, the challenges, the triumphs that have defined John's journey. And I also want you to remember that this is not about John's story. It's about finding reflections of your own journey within his path as he goes there. All right. So obviously, we've already established your start with the rodeos and things of that nature. But even though they were smaller bulls, how did these experiences now shape your approach to business and leadership?
Well, Prosper, before we get into all that, first of all, I want to thank you for the time you spent on the pre-portion of this show and giving me a little bit of feedback on you. I think the best person to interview would be you and the life that you've lived, which is extraordinary. But I will tell you a little bit about mine.
Thank you.
I was born in West Texas, which is a very rural part of the United States. And it's kind of rough. It's kind of tough. And I was riding in rodeos as a kid. Lifestyle was pretty rough. It wasn't as, people may have a lot of different perceptions of different parts of the United States and how we live. When you live in West Texas, it's very arid. It's flat. It's very dry. And but you kind of see what you get. It's kind of like the landscape. People they're just very open. But I was very fortunate because I ended up moving from West Texas to San Diego, California. So I literally went from riding not those bulls that you mentioned earlier, but those steers, to riding waves and becoming a surfer. So it was a tremendous transition for me to be able to go from a place that was very rural America to something that was an area of the country that was with beaches and palm trees and sand. It was quite an experience, very similar to what you experienced when you went through your transition, and you were talking about that earlier. I was very, very fortunate to be able to live in a beautiful place.
Absolutely. I mean, those are quite different extremes. I mean, from land, which is, I'm supposing Texas is more, like you said, open lands and things of that nature, to the the sea type life and things like that. What was causing these shifts and movements in your life? Was it, looking for greener pastures, or was it a family movement?
Well, it was a family movement. And for full disclosure, came from a pretty rough background as a kid. Not something I would really wish on any young person. So my mother and my sister and I all moved to California to get away from that rough lifestyle. And but those sort of situations help groom you to become. So when you end up in a situation as a young kid and it's violent and disruptive, it gives you a greater appreciation for when you can really find some peace and you can lean into things where there's a little more empathy and a little more compassion in dealing with people. So what started off as could be a story of tragedy ultimately ended up in a story of fulfillment and tremendous joy in my life.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things that we always wish to obviously end up in a place where everything is looking up than having to look back at what was and what could have been. All right. And as you were growing in your 20s, you spend that, in the fashion industry, which basically is also a whole different world. I mean, we've seen the steers, now the surfing, and now the catwalks, so to speak, if that even happened.
It's interesting. I actually had coffee with someone this morning that reached out to me because they were looking for some advice on some stuff. And in my life, I almost feel like every chapter, whether it's been, as a young person in West Texas or a teenager in Coronado, California, which is this beautiful resort town, to ultimately going into the fashion industry, I feel like Slumdog Millionaire. I feel like there's been so many of these different chapters in my life that have prepared me for the next chapter and the next chapter and the next chapter. So the fashion part of it was just one of those chapters. I had an opportunity to be what they call a hanger, and a hanger is a model. But in the business, you don't call yourself a model. Well, some do, but I chose not to. You call yourself a hanger because you're being paid to put clothes on. And it was cool. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I made some pretty good money when I was working and the gigs that I did, and did some TV work and some print work and some runway work. And it was beautiful people, beautiful clothes. The whole lifestyle was pretty cool, but it didn't really speak to my heart because my heart of hearts, I was an athlete and I wanted to ultimately be involved in sports. But again, it was kind of like that Slumdog Millionaire a comment I made earlier. It was just one part of the chapter that helped me get ready for the next chapter.
Absolutely. See, the thing about being a hanger in and of itself is you're exposed to trends, you're exposed to characters, people, and things of that nature. And there's a fast thing that happens when you go to those gigs or those call outs, you hurry up and you spend the day waiting. It teaches you a lot of patience. It's something that I also try to get myself into when I got around here. So I can only imagine what that would have done for you. But I like that you kept following your calling, and you ended up holding executive positions with major sports leagues because you always wanted to be an athlete, and that was the path that you ended up sort of following. Now, what were some of the things that you learned on this journey, or what was some of the most challenging things that came while you are now transitioning to these executive positions in major sports leagues?
Well, I think going back to the fashion thing, there's a lot of rejection too. I mean, you go to a casting, and everybody in the room looks really good, and the women and the men, and you think you're pretty special, and then all of a sudden when they don't hire you, it's kind of a real wake up call that, hey, wait a minute, somebody didn't want you. And in most cases, most of the time, you don't get the jobs. So you've got to be able to deal with the rejection. Actually, the very first time I was involved in professional sports, me and a partner were the youngest professional boxing promoters in the United States. The LA Times and NPR did a story about us. And that was when I first dipped my toe in the water in professional sports. It was just a matter of circumstances where we could do this, and we did it in Los Angeles, actually in Long Beach, California. And we did it under chandeliers, and it was very upscale. And I kind of leaned into my fashion background, but also was able to kind of do a little bit of my sports background. And that was the first time. And then my first big break, I was working for a league that was owned by the NFL called the World League of American Football. We had teams in Europe and teams here in the United States. And I ended up being involved in a deal where I ended up putting together the largest sponsorship deal in the entire league. And that put me on the radar, and I was able to give a presentation to Roger Goodell, who's the now commissioner of the National Football League. At the time, it was Paul Tagliabue. Roger was the senior vice president. And I gave a presentation to Roger and all these owners and GMs on how I put this deal together. And I was about 31 years old at the time. And that really put my name out there. People started to hear about this young cat that was doing this stuff. And then that league suspended operation. And then they started back up a couple of years later with NFL Europe. But that league suspended operation. We won a championship, which was great. I've got 2 of those big fat rings that you win when you win a championship. And then I was hired by the Sacramento Kings, the NBA team. I get a call from them. They had heard about me through the stuff I'd done before. So I ended up getting hired by them. And then NFL Europe calls again. And now they want me to move to Europe. And I actually turned it down 3 times. And they kept making a little different offer, and a little this, a little that. And then I ended up moving to Scotland, lived in Edinburgh. And you and I were talking earlier. Yes, I can speak a little bit of Scottish accent. I can. And I can actually sing the Flower of Scotland, which is the national anthem, which is kind of fun to do. And I was over there for a couple of years. We won another championship, got another one of those big rings. And then I get a call from Madison Square Garden. And they had a bit of a struggle in their hands with something. And they had heard through the grapevine that I could help them with that. And I became a VP general manager of the arena football team at Madison Square Garden. And then after a year of doing that, we decided to move that franchise up to Hartford, Connecticut. One of the things people don't realize about Madison Square Garden, even though it's known as the world's most famous arena, it's where the New York Knicks basketball team plays, New York Rangers, the hockey team plays. There's so much more than that. And they're a cable network, they're a theater production company, they're a facilities management company. And we were running the facility up in Hartford at the time. We decided to move that franchise up to Hartford, and I was asked to stay in New York by the CEO at the time of the Garden and be the VP of marketing for the New York Rangers, which was a tremendous experience. Wayne Gretzky was on the team at the time, and it was very, very cool. And that was the transition of I went from being this young, very young executive with the World League to becoming a VP GM with Madison Square Garden in a matter of 7 years. It was kind of just skyrocket, took off. And I really contribute a lot of that to all those things that happened to me previously in my life. That Slumdog Millionaire thing I was talking about earlier, all these things were preparing me for that. And then it was fantastic. And then from there, I transitioned into another career.
Absolutely. I mean, like you mentioned, and you said MSG. We've got an MCG here in Melbourne Cricket Ground, and it's equally as famous. So MSG, Madison Square Garden. I've seen so many events on there, and so many comedians want to do a gig in MSG. And you can imagine so many people just want that to be the crown of their career. Would you say that was it for you? Because it must have been really exhilarating being amongst all of that action and things of that. What would be the most memorable moment of your time there?
Well, crown of my career, boy, each chapter, Prosper, had it was a crowning moment.
Mhm.
They were all different. Was MSG the most high profile? It had to be. I mean, when you're working at the world's most famous arena, I do a presentation called Coaching Up, and I speak to audiences. And one of the topics that I discuss is imposter syndrome. And I'll never forget my first day. I get dropped off. I'm in front of this building. I'm looking up at Madison Square Garden, and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? I mean, I'm one. I think at the time I was the youngest vice president in the building. I certainly had the least amount of experience because I hadn't walked in the door yet, other than the interviews. And I'm thinking, what am I doing? These guys are the best of the best. This is the very best in professional sports are in this building. What am I doing here? So I was dealing with tremendous imposter syndrome. But yes, it was certainly a crowning moment for me from a professional standpoint. But then being able to go to Europe and do the things we do over there was a crowning moment. And then putting together the deal with the World League, which ended up being the largest deal in the league, and then being the youngest professional boxing promoter in the United States was a big deal. And then one little thing I didn't mention earlier, I got to work at the number one nightclub in the world for a while. So I got to do things that most people never get to do. I mean, so there's always been all these things in my life that were crowning moments. And that's probably one of the reasons I have such a big smile on my face, when I walk around, because from the time that all the way up to that time, that's only 40 years old. I've got 25 more years of doing some really cool stuff that's been a lot of fun. But yes, Madison Square Garden was certainly a crowning achievement as a professional, and I'll never forget it. And very proud that I was able to be one of those executives that are really the best of the best.
And congratulations on all these, accolades and things of that nature. But from all of these things, there's just this string of, how do you call it? I think in Australia we call it betting on yourself, where you're literally putting yourself on the line and knowing that you will succeed. Okay. So it's akin to a bird, landing on a twig. All right. It's not looking at the twig to hold it. It's obviously knows that it can fly. So it's betting on itself that if the twig breaks, I'm not holding on to it for survival. I can bet on my wings to get away from the situation. And obviously, with all this happening, it's a lot for somebody to take all in, from somebody who, from what you say, humble beginnings from Texas. Now you are at the MSG, which is the highest, place anybody would ever want to be at. How do you feel comfortable doing this? And obviously, like you said, you sometimes have imposter syndrome and things like that, but you ended up doing it anyway. What sort of advice do you have for people that hesitate to actually take bold moves when the time comes?
Oh, that's a great question, Prosper. I was actually asked that on a podcast here about 4 months ago, and they said when I spun off to leave the sports business and start being an entrepreneur and going into business for myself, was I scared? And that's exactly what I said, what you shared earlier. I said I'll always bet on myself. I believe in myself more than I believe in anything else. And when I left the sports business, I left because of my family. And I decided not to continue to pursue sports. I wanted to coach my kids, be around my kids, work with my kids, be an active father. But I started a consulting business. But all those things that I had learned when I was in the sports business gave me a bit of the pedigree to be able to do that. But then you still had to be a hunter and not a gatherer or a farmer. So I had to be out there making sure I was getting the business and bringing it in, and at the same time being able to spend the time with my kids. So the best advice that I could give through all that stuff for any young or even older, and even much older executive or business person would be, do bet on yourself. If everyone has skills. We all have these amazing skills that's just right here in our hands. Bet on those skills and then go out there and be aggressive. Use your gifts. I was able to do that. And I was able to carve out a little niche in the consulting world as a marketing person, and started having some growth with some companies I was working with, and some really big growth. that I was working with. And then that was kind of very similar to the sports thing. I started doing some good work for this person, this person, this person. Never, ever made a cold call, never marketed my services. It was all word of mouth. One person would tell another person would tell another person. And that just kind of took off. And I firmly believe that it really comes down to the biggest piece of that is to be confident and to just believe in what you're doing. And when that confidence exudes to the client, and when you're showing them strategies that's going to help them be better at what they do, and then they start feeling better about who they are, then all of a sudden they start having more success. Now, there had to be some smart strategies involved as well, but it's just as much about our attitude as it is about what we're executing from a strategic standpoint. You can have the greatest strategy in the world, but if you're not doing it with confidence, you're not doing it with some joy and some passion, it's really hard to be successful. So when I worked with clients, I was always constantly trying to bring them along from a personal, professional standpoint to that strategy as much as I was trying to align them with that strategy. And that was, I think, one of the reasons that we had a lot of success. And when I say we, I've been a solo consultant for many, many years. I say we because it does take all of us to work together, whatever the project is. No one does it by themselves.
Absolutely. I quite like that. And we've got a statement that says, if you want to go far, you go alone. But if you want to go further, you go together. But that only comes about if you know how to engage the people to take on that journey, if you know how to actually weave through all of those scenarios and circumstances so that you get the best out of everyone. Just like when you showed up on the show, we spoke all about me before we even started. And that alone is emotional intelligence, because you did not come in with that pride of, oh, what does this guy know? I've been at the top of my game at the Madison Square Garden. I've done this. I don't think he's even rode on a bull or a zebra. I've been, you know what I mean? But you came in humble, and that alone opens people up. And when people are open, opportunities start happening. Now, this must be a skill that you have. How do you incorporate this into your coaching and sales strategies at your consulting now?
Well, first of all, when we first got on the call and I did ask you those questions, being authentic is the most important thing in the world. Authenticity is such a powerful emotion. As a matter of fact, it's even more powerful than love. So when I asked you those questions, I truly wanted to start developing a relationship with you. If we're doing it if we're disingenuous and we're doing it, people see through it. So when I coach people and I'm coaching them on enhancing their EQ, developing greater authenticity in how they execute things, understanding how important gratitude is in our lives, how it literally rewires our brain, understanding that we all deal with doubt and imposter syndrome. Everyone does. Not everyone deals with imposter syndrome. 80% of the people out there deal with imposter syndrome. Everyone deals with doubt. And the more we understand that we deal with doubt, come that, the better. The more that we can understand that everyone's gifted and that we try to nurture those gifts, the sooner we realize that when we connect with people, and you and I had this conversation earlier, when we connect with people, that's when things really start to happen. That's why I spent the time to get to know you in the beginning. If you and I are going to spend this time together, we might as well make it as fruitful as we can, right? And I hope this isn't the last conversation we have. I hope that we can continue this. I hope that your forehead can be against my forehead. And we had that discussion earlier about that in the African culture when someone does that. I hope that we can continue this conversation so we can have better collaborative communication. Collaborative communication is one of the things that I touch on. The fact that I encourage people to listen with the intent to understand and not the intent to answer or reply. And share with folks that the eye contact we use, the body language that we use. There's so many little things that we do from a coaching standpoint that make us better human beings and better people. Once we become that better human being and that better person, we become a better salesperson. We become a better business development person. We become a better leader. We become a better, whatever the case may be. Once we start to really, really dive into connecting, like you and I did from the very beginning, if I would have come into this conversation, the guest is, okay, what are we going to do, Prosper? Walk me through the questions. All right. And then you start asking the questions. Without any of the stuff we did earlier, it wouldn't have been as near as thoughtful. We wouldn't have connected. We may have connected a little, but I feel you now because I know a little bit about you. I know about your background. I know when you went to Australia, they had that teacher that pushed you. And then some of the failures you had, some of the successes you had. What happened in social media, how no one's going to own your content again. You're going to own your content. So now we've got that connection. Now, when you ask me these questions and I start sharing my heart and what's going on with me, now you feel a greater connection with me. See, if we do that in the business environment and start building those, developing those relationships, then there is no deal we can't do. There is no project we can't execute on. It's just a matter of doing that kind of coaching. And that's what I do literally every day. I did it with somebody over coffee. I have some coaching later this week with 10 different people where we're talking about their elevator pitch for their business. And we're gonna first read it, then we're gonna write it, then we're gonna say it, and we're gonna talk about it in a manner that speaks from their heart. So there's all these little things we can do as a coach, but it all comes back to being human, being a person. All the other minutia of sales strategy and business dev strategy, that's just a piece of the pie. Once we develop that relationship piece, then everything else falls into place.
Absolutely. And you know what I like about all of that is people buy from people. They don't buy from the brands or whatever it is. And even if, putting it back to you being in sports, when people are in a football game, they're not playing team versus team. They're playing defender versus, striker. And if you need to tackle the quarterback, that's the person you need to tackle. You're not tackling the whole franchise or anything else that person comes along with. And is this what you call human being coaching? Because so many people will then look at you and be like, oh my, he's achieved all these things. I'm probably going to be a bit starstruck. He probably knows a lot more people than I would. And if I ask him any question right now, he will probably think, am I stupid or what's going on? But you don't come across as that.
I think age and maturity have a little bit to do with that. I think living an extremely full life, being able to do things that a lot of people haven't done. They didn't get to experience some of the things I did. And then the grounded piece of that, when I focused on being a father and I focused on my family, that grounded piece is what probably really brought me full circle to the man I needed to be. So yes, I draw off of, the experiences I've had, which has been pretty cool. I draw off some of the institutions that I've been able to work with. I draw off of being a seasoned guy that's done a lot of things, and I try to be thoughtful and mindful in things I do. And I draw off of that being that father that really wanted to be the best dad I could be. It goes back to what we shared in the very beginning, Prosper, Slumdog Millionaire. Every one of these chapters in my life have been preparing me for now. When I coach people, I just try to accelerate that. If I'm coaching someone like today, the young person I was with was, you don't ask a person their age, but I'm going to guess she's probably in her late 20s. And she reached out to me, asked if we could have coffee and talk about just life. She saw me speak at an event. I want to accelerate her learning curve so she can be successful even quicker and do it in a way where she's even more satisfied. And that's the key. There's this balance between grind. I mean, I used to grind. I mean, I even grind some big hours and I wasn't satisfied. So when I found that balance, I still get up very early in the morning. I still work into the evening, and where I am now, it is the evening. You can tell how dark it is outside. But it's just helping accelerate that curve for the people that I coach so that they can realize success sooner rather than later. Because the sooner you recognize that success, both personally and professionally, the sooner you really start enjoying life.
Now, John, if somebody is obviously really enjoying this conversation and is now thinking, what would I be able to get if I connect with John, or what is it that you're offering that, when people show up and you start working with them?
Well, first of all, connect with me. So the best way to do that would be on LinkedIn. And I think you have my LinkedIn account number, if you could post that in there. Yeah. And then email address, the best email for me is John, it's JOHN .Hall, HALL, at Crux, that's CRUX-X.com, and just start the conversation. Or go to my LinkedIn page and listen to other podcasts, or go to my LinkedIn page and look what I post. I posted something about Rory McIlroy today and how his brand is, it was so amazing to watch the crowd for this, for yesterday at the Masters, and I was enthralled by all of it. To watch the crowd, to watch his peers, and just see how much they respected him. It says everything about him. That's our brand, Prosper. If our brand is solid and people view us, what do they say about us when we leave the room? If our brand is solid and people say good things about us when we leave the room, then business is going to come. It's when we leave the room and they don't say good things when you're going to really struggle in business. So I try to help people make sure their brand is a brand that people speak positively when you leave the room.
Absolutely. I'll definitely make sure that all those links are in the show notes below and things of that nature. Now, John, obviously, as somebody who is curating all these experiences and being the best version of yourself as you are and helping others along the way, because I viscerally believe we're here to live, to learn, and to contribute. So, in order for you to live your best life, you need to have learned to do that. And once you've done that, send the elevator down so that others can also, learn from you. And you did mention something that, what do people say about you when you're not in the room? With all that you have done and with where you are headed, what would you hope people would say about the life you've lived?
He left the room a better place.
Wow. That is true. Well, you left this Zoom room a whole better place than you found it. And I think that is absolutely true. Your life journey and your life story, the places you've been, you've accumulated all these experiences, and I think you're the right person to put them in a bowl and actually deliver on it to the people that have that opportunity. Because how many people would say they've done the rodeo? How many people would say they've surfed? How many people would say they've been a hanger themselves? How many people would say they've climbed the highest elevation in MSG, and the most recognized sports ground in the world, and all the other things that you have done, the biggest deal that you managed to conquer for your teams, the places you travel to while you are representing your brands, everything else. You can draw from all those experiences and just channel somebody to become who they want to be. So I think you're the best guy for this.
Thank you, Prosper. It's fun. It's a blast. You know, it's kind of like the conversation you and I had before we got on the air. It's fun when you're connecting and you're jamming, you're going, and things are good. It's fun. And there's too many speed bumps and challenges in life that are going to try to derail us. Let's eliminate as many of those as possible. Just have a good time doing it and be successful along the way.
Absolutely. Well, I kind of feel like you're only just getting started, John. What's next for you, for Crux Xcelerate? Any upcoming projects or goals that you're excited about?
We're in the midst of a really big project with one particular company that's really cool. They're called Circadia, and this is pretty cool. They create work environments where workers want to go. They want to be there because it's so cool. They create work environments where it's so cool that their workers want to bring clients and they want to bring prospects. It's all about process and life. So that when you walk in the door, it's got this really cool feeling. So I have all these biz dev people I'm working with right now. They've got this really cool product. So it's a lot of fun. This is as much fun as I've ever had in my life. I've got a big keynote coming up. I do a lot of keynote speaking, a lot of motivational speaking. So I got a big keynote coming up in a couple of months. So life is good, brother. Life is really good. And it's so much better just meeting you tonight or today for you, tonight for me, and spending a little time with you before the show. Obviously, I really appreciate the time during the show, but it's good. And this will not be the last time you and I talk. It might be just off air, either FaceTime or something, but we're going to definitely, or Zoom or something, we're going to connect again.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you opening up that channel. And John, I can't thank you enough for joining me on this enlightening episode. I think it was more for me than it was for our audiences. And I speak, truly from the heart saying that, because your story really reminds us that our paths are not always linear. Even when you were asking me about how my journey started, I was only just trying to find those strategic points, and it was all done because I was there. No one can replicate what I did, and no one can replicate the story that you have. But with resilience and self-belief, we can actually navigate any terrain, and that's the biggest thing that I took from this particular conversation here today. So thank you so much for having gone through that journey and now being the one, speaking in front of the podium, telling us that your journey matters too.
Well, Prosper, I'll leave you with this. My head's against your head, and I will give you the deepest bow, my friend.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. And for those that are
and by the way, that spoiler alert, both of those references are something that Prosper and I spoke about before we got on this podcast. So.
Absolutely. Now, for those that are watching right now, if this episode resonated with you, obviously consider checking the links that I'm going to be putting in the show notes below so you can connect with John and also have the same experience that I actually had today. And I just encourage you to obviously stay tuned to the Online Prosperity Show, where we're obviously going to be bringing you exciting guests like we just had with John. And don't forget to subscribe, for more content like this. Now, I can't thank you enough, John. And thank you so much for tuning into the Online Prosperity Show. Bye for now.
Prosper.